Well, hello there. This is John Bishop, and I'm here with my very good friend, Dr. Nancy Flournoy. This is going to be a very informative and powerful webinar on the Lifewave Silent Nights patch. It was, I think, the second patch that was designed by the company. We'll learn about that from Nancy. And also a product that was just launched at the end of the last year called the Dream Aromatherapy Spray. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Flournoy.
Thank you, John. I'm happy to be here. I want to give a little announcement before I start the official talk. That is to say that I've been on a plane twice this fall, winter, and I just had a flight to see my mother, who is pushing 104, and it's the second time where I have gone, I show my ID and get in, and they tell me, because I'm so old, I don't take my shoes off. And then I get in to actually do the screening, and the person doing the screening says, "You're not 75." And I'm just thinking, for one, it's really cool. And the other is that I really need some business cards to hand out to these people when I get screened, because I'm missing an opportunity there.
You do.
So anyway, I wanted to share that with you all. I am Professor Emerita of Biomathematics. I have been doing research in the medical sciences for decades, and so I know a fair amount about medicine, but the Lifewave patches have taken me on an amazing journey of exploring and learning about what's known and not known about the biology of our bodies and our human system. And so as I have enjoyed learning about this myself, I would share this with you. And I am going to share my screen now, so you can tell me if you see the.
Okay, yep, that looks good.
Okay. And now I will the slideshow. So today we're talking about the Silent Night patch and the new product that they have just come out with called the Dream Spray. And we're doing them together because they both address sleeping. And in my former, I have done a former talk on the patch itself. And so this will be a little different in that we're interested in, how are they the same? How are they different? Why did we need another patch to help us sleep, etc. So what I have on this slide is what the company is, legally permitted by the FDA to claim on their advertising brochures. So for the patch, it's clinically shown to increase the length of sleep by 66%, and it enhances the quality of sleep. And for the spray, it encourages feelings of rest and relaxation, soothes your senses with a peaceful aroma, creates a calming ambience for your bedtime routine. Okay, so all of that sounds nice, but there's not enough meat there for it to be really earth-shattering, because there's lots of products that aim to help you in this area. So we'll explore what's different and new about these. So first, in the last time I gave the talk on the Silent Night patch, I gave several slides on why sleep and what the problems were with not sleeping, and I'm going to skip most of that tonight, skip all of it tonight, because we only have so much time. But just to summarize things, you need to sleep to repair your muscles and tissues. You need to have the time and the energy to stimulate muscle growth, boost your immune function, and restore your energy. So those are some great reasons to go to sleep. And I'll just remind those of you that probably make it to my webinar already know this, but all of the Lifewave patches are patented proprietary form of phototherapy. They're targeted passive wireless nanotechnology with nano antenna, just broadcasting that light that we emit from our own bodies back to us at specially devised wavelengths. There's no drugs, no chemicals, and no stimulus, And if you want to know more about how the patch interacts with the body, I recommend my overview talk, which all my talks are on my YouTube channel. That's Nancy at Nancy Flournoy, all one word, which I'll remind you at the end. So no more about the patches, because we have a lot to kind of explore to find out how this spray works. So all I'll tell you this is about the patch, remind you, is that its aim was to increase the hormone melatonin. So with that statement in the background, let's look at the spray. So what David Schmidt, the CEO founder of Lifewave, did is develop a new way to deliver information to our brains. And of course, the patch was one such new way to deliver information, that is by reflecting light at certain frequencies to send certain messages to our brain. In the case of the silent night patch, to increase the hormone melatonin. So here we have another way to deliver information to the brain. And what he did, he's got two mists now. We're focusing on the dream mist to talk about sleep. And I assume there'll be other mists to come. But in what both of these mists have in common is that they are the special items are infused in this structured and energized water, which he's been very careful to create, and which one could probably have a whole talk just on that. But this water is important for helping the molecules get from our nose into our brain. And so and they are called aromatherapy, not because they are aromatherapy, but because the FDA had to put them in an existing bucket, and aromatherapy was the closest bucket to the different options that were available. So, so it's a word. The product has natural ingredients, and we'll see a list later, and they're in this proprietary energized and structured water. And then to use them, you spray a little on your wrist, you sniff it a few times before you go to bed, and then you have a good night's sleep. So how does that work? Well, this is like an overview picture. We have at the top, just look at the top first, you smell the nice aroma. It goes up through the nose, and then it hits this little, like a little soft cartilage. It's not actually cartilage, but it's not as hard as bone either. It's softer, but it's I guess they do describe it as bone here. So you've got this bony structure, and then on top of that is an entity they call the olfactory bulb, and we'll be saying more about that. But this area blows that up, and before we talk about that, just take a look at what happens after it leaves that bulb. There's two pathways. One goes into a place in the brain that's near the stem cell. So that's very much toward your animal instincts. And it introduces with the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland, and we'll see what's happening there. And then the other branch here goes into the part of your brain, where we do more of our analytical thinking. And we won't say so much about that. But right here, this looks like a lot of stuff happening. I'm going to show you another slide of that, because this is where a true miracle happens. Or maybe that's the only one I left. Let me see. Yeah, okay, we're going to stay here for a minute. So what is going on here? And it's true miracle. I got a little sidetracked here, actually, because I had been sort of tuned into thinking about these places in the brain where you send in a molecule, when the thing that you're smelling is a molecule that's in the air. You don't see it because it's a gas, but it's a molecule, and it goes in here. And then at this point, when it goes through this bone, what goes through this bone, you have nerves that penetrate down through the bone, and it catches, the nerve catches one of these molecules. And when you get to the other side, what you're sending on up to the brain is an electromagnetic pulse. You turn this molecule into electricity. And that's a real wonder. Our body does it in a number of different places, and it can be electricity going to molecules, molecules going to electricity, but it's really totally amazing. And so what you have down here says olfactory hair receptors, and you see something down here that's going to get hooked on, get lodged. And then this is all one pieces of a nerve, and the fiber goes up and it goes through the bone, and it gets to the other side here. And then there are a few other pieces here that are very interesting. And we'll talk a little bit about that side later. So once then you get to the bulb connects to the brain, which is a part of the cerebral cortex. And the olfactory cortex, now we're talking about the brain. We go right from our sinus, our olfactory, right where you smell it in, and it goes right into the brain. This part of the brain near the brainstem is involved with emotions, survival instincts, and memory formation. And when you start trying to follow the literature, in this case, I was trying to follow the literature, like, here's coming the smell. What's it doing about sleeping? What does it do about sleeping? And what you find, though, is that most of the literature goes off and studies these effects. How does what you smell affect your emotion, your survival, your memory? It's really kind of hard to track down what happens to what you smell and sleep. So the olfactory cortex then in the brain has to do with, in this area of the brain that's called the limbic system, has these three, well, the limbic system has about 5 features. 3 of them are involved with the smelling. So the amygdala, the hippocampus, and the hypothalamus. And they are here. You see my cursor, right next to it here. And then this band that's around. And if you notice, we're right on top of the brainstem at this point. So we'll be focusing on the hypothalamus because that's the component of the brain that is involved with sleep, and particularly with the switch between whether you're asleep or awake. And so it's neurons in this little area that promote sleep by inhibiting the areas in the brainstem that keep you awake. So that's kind of the physical layout. And what happens now in the hypothalamus? Well, as I said, we went from molecules to electricity. And in the hypothalamus, we're going to go back from this electrical signal to molecules. And the molecules that get affected are these 2, glutamate and GABA. And glutamate's the gas and GABA's the brake. So if you're looking as we are in this talk about promoting sleep, we're looking at David having mixed up a batch of smells for us to sniff that are going to increase GABA. And GABA is a neurotransmitter that blocks messages that are sent that would otherwise keep you awake. So you want, this little picture shows, what's optimal is to have a balance between GABA and glutamate. And this is a little more complicated. I'll show you in another slide, but you want them balanced in a healthy manner. And if you have too much glutamate, you're going to be anxious, restless, you'll have migraines, tics. You don't want to have too much glutamate. You also, of course, want to have enough to be healthy and to do what you need to do. So now this is the picture I was thinking of earlier, where this is back on the, this is the olfactory bulb here at the top. Here's the bone right at the top of your where you breathe, at the bottom down here, you breathe in these little dots or molecules. So those are the synchs. You breathe them in, and here's the picture of the nerve that's where they're going to get up and get caught. And they're going to get the signal, then we turn the information in the molecule into the information in the nerve, and it comes up into this, the little thing that looks like a circle is called a glomerulus. And these part of the cell here that has these little branches coming out of it is called the mitral cell. And so we're going to come back to the hypothalamus, but because that's where the main effect on sleep is. But what I found fascinating about this is that these mitral cells can release the glutamate we just talked about, which is the main excitatory cell in the body. And this is sort of this picture up here upside down. You come in and here's the glutamus, and then you come down, here are the ones that look like this. These are the granular cells, and these will emit the GABA, the go to sleep cells. So what this is showing us is that in order for the sense to get in order for us to get a reaction from the scent, it doesn't have to go in, it doesn't have to have complex brain processing. It doesn't have to go into the hypothalamus and have something complicated going on. Just all it has to do is get through this bone at the top of, above the roof of our mouth, above the roof of our nose cavity. As soon as it gets above that, you can either be excited or calm down. And this is a very primitive reactions, because they're not, as I say, they're not really going through your brain cortex. There's no thought involved. You're going to react. And this is, really explains how you can feel a big change when you're given different smells. So just this far, and the scents that are in the spray can be having a calming effect on you. Now, trying to look at how the patch and the scents kind of combine together. So remember, the patch is increasing melatonin. So so here is the brain, and it's this area. Look at the blue area and basically think of that if we're looking at the effects of these two patches together, aside from the one I just mentioned, which is immediate, we're looking at what's going on in this blue area. So with melatonin is producing melatonin is your natural state. So if we didn't have any sunshine or any light, we'd be pretty sleepy all the time. So here, the light-induced activation, I'll tell you what SCN is in a minute, but the light prevents the production of melatonin. And so it's by stopping the production of melatonin that you stay awake. And so the melatonin is produced here in the pineal gland. It's on the back side of the hypothalamus. And on the front side of the hypothalamus, we have this little area they call SCN that's got too long of a name to try and pronounce. And this is all connected to light via the eyeball and the optical system. So light either comes in or doesn't come in. It's light or dark. And so that information about whether it's light or not dark gets sent to the SCN. We'll hear more about that in a minute. It gets passed on through the hypothalamus to the pineal gland, and then if it is light, the production of melatonin will be turned off. So in some sense, one can think of the pineal gland as part of our visual system, because it's right on the nerve from the eyeball. Okay, so we have light, we have this area called the SCN, we have the pineal gland, and we have the hypothalamus. So this SCN piece lies within the hypothalamus. It uses light to establish and maintain the biological clock or circadian rhythm. So, the melatonin is going to put us to sleep, but we also need our whether we're asleep or not is part of a much bigger system, which is controlled and synchronated with the biological clock, be it the 12-hour clock or the yearly clock. And at the other end of the hypothalamus, the pineal gland, Rene Descartes called that the seat of the soul. And he said its main function is to receive information about the state of the light-dark cycle from the environment, convey the information to produce and secrete the hormone melatonin. So we've got all of this going on. And now this is a little busy. I just want to show you a couple of things here. I liked in the reference I found, the articles I found here, where we're getting into a little of the biophysics, the reference to the circadian clock is as a biochemical oscillator, the central biochemical oscillator. I thought that was pretty clear, pretty interesting, because we talked about molecules, we talked about electromagnetic fields, we talked about light, and now we're talking about oscillation, that it's rhythms and wavelengths that are important. And all of this is happening in a very little piece of our brain. So, I guess what I want to say about the picture is just to notice that they have this little component of the brain, the SCN at the top, that's gotten the information from your eyeball. And when which is light, electricity, it goes through, it signals a couple of changes here, and then the result is a production of these molecules, either or some balance of glutathione and GABA. So it is in this little piece of the brain they call the SCN, where the light information gets changed into those molecules that are going to excite you or put you to sleep. And there's a few other, chemicals that get to play in this process, but these are the main players in the process. So now what we have shown is that whether we're talking about the spray or the patch, we're going to be turning on these chemicals, or in the case of the spray, turning on GABA in particular, but in the case of the clock, balancing the two. And so melatonin naturally increases. This is starting, notice this calendar starts at 12 noon. So it's increasing as you get towards evening, peaks in the middle of the night, drops quickly, and then returns back to the daytime low. And when I showed you the picture going from the eyeball to the pineal gland, where the melatonin is produced, what was not in that picture is this fact that the melatonin has a feedback loop. So the melatonin then affects the biological clock in the SCN. So what that tells us is we have the effects of the silent night patch affecting the melatonin production. And we have the spray coming in, as far as I can tell, into the same system, but through these different delivery mechanisms that are even different states of being, as in light, electricity, and wavelengths and molecules. Very cool. And this is just a picture to show that when glutamate goes up, GABA goes down, and that you want these to be sync nicely. And if they are out of sync, you have trouble. And so you want your melatonin that's helping to regulate the both of them, and not just the GABA to put yourself to sleep. And this is another picture really of the same thing with the night and the day. Same picture. Let me pass on. So a little more about melatonin. Melatonin's a hormone. So what's a hormone? So it's a chemical messenger. You know, it's not a light. It's not a electrical shock. It's a chemical messenger. And they're messengers that coordinate our organs. And on the right-hand side over here, we have a little schematic of all the organs that melatonin is particularly effective on or with. And in general, this picture here shows that you have a cell here on the left, and you see it starts spitting out these molecules, of which melatonin is the one we're talking about. It dumps them in the blood vessels, and then your circulatory system takes them to where they're needed, if everything's functioning right, and then drops them off, and they connect to the target. So the hormones are delivered through the circulatory system. So here's another picture of the same idea with this melatonin particularly in mind. Here we have the pineal gland, and the molecules get sped out and dumped into the blood. Now, melatonin's half-life is only about 40 minutes. So if you're going to get 8 hours of sleep, or even 7 hours of sleep, you've got to be producing melatonin pretty continuously or you'll run out. So it's not stored. It also then, as we've seen, it goes into the blood system and out of the blood system. It freely runs across cell and nuclear membranes. So it's quite a little chemical there. And where does it bind up? Well, the brain, and particularly in the areas we were talking about, the hypothalamus, the pituitary, the hippocampus, and this SCN. It's involved with the clock. But it also binds to cells in the immune system, the gonads, the kidneys, and the cardiovascular system. So and probably places they haven't found it yet. So it's working around the body. And just to be sort of complete then, we've talked about it in the SCN, that's this in the center. We've talked about it in the hypothalamus. It's also active right in your retina, involved with the interocular pressure and dopamine release. And here's a list of places where it has been examined and studied. That is your pituitary gland, your testes, your adrenal cortex, et cetera, et cetera. And in more general terms, it's been found to signal for cell protection and repair. Well, this is one of the things you do when you sleep, right? So it's not just inducing you to go to sleep, but it's telling your body to get busy and use this sleep time to clean up the garbage that you've got in your system. So it activates the gene deaths to clean up, activates your survival genes to survive, and protects you against oxidation, where you have too much, and has antioxidant properties. So it's quite a busy little molecule. And of course, as we age, we don't have any. So here's this graph. This flat line here is really not at 0. It's really at about 10%, but it's certainly not 10%. This is micrograms per milliliter on the y-axis. But needless to say, you in your 20s, you have a lot. And by the time, I guess the x-axis is missing in this, but this peaks at about earlier than most of the other. I mean, most of the hormones look about like this in terms of dropping, but melatonin drops faster than the others. I think I took out a slide that had no numbers on it, but I think this is like in your 20s, it already starts down. And melatonin supplements have been popular. They're kind of advertised for, get yourself back in sync when you do long distance travel. But they can cause side effects that are not desirable. And the effects are benefited, there's a lot of effects that don't have a lot of studies behind them. So much more satisfying to do something without these side effects for sure. And there's lots of problems with taking drugs. I don't need to go into the details here. If you've tried any of drugs to try and get you to go to sleep, you understand that that there are consequences. So now just 2 slides on the ingredients. I'm not going to go into the details because we don't have time. Maybe another talk we'll look into what these actually are. But the spray has beans, has pine trees. David in his talks talk about the pine. This is a pine seed extract, and this one down here is a pollen. The pines have the pine pollen and extract have actual hormones in them that have hormones in them. So you're smelling hormones. You've got jasmine, lavender. These are things that are, known, associated with making you feel calm. And as we know, as soon as it gets across that bone into your olfactory bulb, you're going to be reacting to it. So the effects should be quite quick. Now, Silent Nights, this was in Melinda Connor's 2013 paper, which really surprised me that the Silent Night patch is actually registered as a homeopathic. And language is Melinda's, where she talks about Silent Night's formulary, which is kind of the language you might see in a homeopathic. And so I haven't seen David elaborate on this, but what I think this means is that the crystal, the patch crystal itself, is made up of homeopathic, made up of these homeopathic molecules. Or I guess by the time you've got a homeopathic remedy or dilution, the molecules are basically gone. What you've got left is the vibrational, you've got the fluid that still has the vibrational memory of the molecules in it. And so again, it's an interesting interplay because you're going to take the light from the body, reflect it off the crystal, and it is these it's the crystal made of a vibrational fluid that's going to reflect back the light. All very amazing. But at any rate, at the time, I've used this slide before, and at the time I made it, I looked up all of these things just to see, you know, what they did, and they all have some relationship to making you feel comfortable and making you feel sleepy. You know, you take some to have a wakeful, if you have, you take some for wakeful and restless nights, some for physical restlessness, just a lot of things all consistent with helping you sleep. Melatonin itself is not there, which is interesting. And it makes me think maybe that David's really operating more on the vibrational content of what's in both of these products. And I think that because we have a third product that I know of that really is designed to reach and act on the hypothalamus, which is where all this is happening, and that's the SP6, which we'll talk about another time. But he likes to put it on a particular acupuncture spot, which he describes as having a super highway to the hypothalamus. And so, again, I think the whole, as they said, was it the master oscillator, the big oscillator in the world in terms of keeping our body synchronated, is responsive to these rhythms. I'm going to finish up with just a few comments on the research on the silent night patches. I didn't find anything on the spray. We know he had something because it's FDA approved, but it wasn't in our back office yet. So with respect to the silent night patch research, there are two articles. One by Norman Shealy, 2011. If anybody doesn't know him, you should look him up. 2013 by Melinda Connor, who is the terrific scientist who's now doing a lot of work with David. So the work that was done by Melinda Connor, she did lots and lots of studies, long list here. She used lots of different pieces of equipment to get different kinds of measurements. She did questionnaires. There were, it's just this huge battery of information. And so usually when, someone says a result is statistically significant, they mean that there's a 5% chance of that statement being wrong. And so when you do lots and lots of studies, you expect to have some results just kind of randomly make it over the mark, and those would be false positives. The results from this study are particularly interesting because the things that are positive are not like just little random this or that happen to be positive. What happens is a whole group of similar same things are positive, and this is very interesting. So all of the significant changes were neurotransmitters, not all these other things they measured, amino acids, everything they could think of. But the things that were significant were all neurotransmitters. And she measured it at different time points after, before and after the patching. And the ones on this, on the left here in the red box, were significant for every single time point. And so what's on this list that we've been talking about is melatonin and GABA itself. And what we didn't talk about is serotonin, but serotonin is converted into melatonin. You start with serotonin. So the fact that it's up means that you've got a basis for making more melatonin. And these other components are also very, very important, but they weren't quite part of this story, which is adrenaline for fight or flight, and a component for your spatial and temporal control of expressing dreams. That sounds important. Dopamine, which is one of your we talked about last time with respect to nirvana. I'm not sure what this is. I have to look it up. I'm sure I did once. And then NAD we'll have to talk about more at another time because David talks a lot about that. And so at some point we will say more about NAD. Now over here on the right are the other neurotransmitters, and they were not significant for the early days, like days 1, 3, 1, 4, but they became significant later. So, so the neurotransmitters, it looks like the silent night patch is really quite influential on the neurotransmitters. The others, part of this study was with the discharge visualization, gas discharge visualization, and I've shown a picture like this for a number of different studies. This machine's used for a lot of the patches. It's down here. You put your hand on the plate, and it's got gold plate so that they'll transfer your electricity. And these are pictures here of 2 fingers. What shows up from your fingers, and the one on the right is nice and healthy. You've got a uniform discharge around it, and the one on the left is not so healthy because it's not uniform. And a nice little leaf that's nice and healthy is up here in the right corner. And they have quite a system of evaluation, and Melinda has written a paper on this machine because it was really bad-mouthed in a lot of our, if you just start looking for it, there's a lot of, there's some people will say this is trash, and it was really bad-mouthed, but it was just not understood in our country. And so she has a major paper done on the machine itself, which is nice to see. And it supports that the patch downregulates stress in the areas of the hypothalamus, the nervous system, and a couple other places. So that's consistent. They also tested heart rate variability, and we won't go into that because we talk about that in other contexts as well, but it's consistent with the downregulation of stress, and the other tests are consistent with you're feeling better. So that was great. Norman Shealy did an early study, and he had he asked people questionnaires. He had a lot of questions he asked them. And the results of that is that big improvements in sleep were reported. So altogether, of course, I'm not I am a doctor, but I'm not a medical doctor. So I am not trying to give any medical advice. And if you need medical advice, you should talk to your doctor. And these are wellness patches, and they are for your wellness. You can find, I have a YouTube channel. I should have put it just at Nancy Flournoy. Should get you there. Now they have handles, and I'm not quite sure how well they work, but that's it. I have a website, lightpatchscience.com, which I need to update. But I will be talking here first Friday and third Friday of each month. So I look forward to seeing you again at my next talk. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Nancy. That was great, as usual. And we got Philip on here today, too.
Hi,
Hey, Philip.
Philip.
Late. I need some dinner. I was really looking forward to you talking about this new product, which and it seems it has many comparisons to others, but how it enters our system is so different. And
Yeah,
I've always
I started out with that, and you missed the beginning. So
I'm so sorry,
well,
but you know, the whole idea of aromatherapy, the whole idea of aromatherapy has always been a little like, it sounds a little new agey. But I knew that there was some science behind it, but I think it really depends on if there's science behind what the aromatherapy.
Well, and if you listen to David talk, the only reason it's called aromatherapy is because that's the closest thing that the FDA had for them to call it, and that it really is something else entirely.
Right.
That's understandable, yeah.
Right, and I don't think these other. Yeah, I'm pretty sure, because I was kind of checking like doTERRA and stuff like that. They don't have that structured water delivery system.
Oh, that's new. That's his.
Yeah.
That's
which makes a lot of
Structured
sense.
water has been around, but it's
no, but not as a delivery system for things to go up your nose.
I know. So, and I know that's involved with this, but boy, this is all. We used to say back in the 20th century, well, that's really 21st century stuff. Well, this is really 22nd century stuff.
Definitely ahead of the curve. Yeah. Well, thanks, Nancy.
Okay, I think I'll stop the recording.
Okay, good.